I had a job as a book designer and an art director, so was spending a lot of time thinking about books. I'd always wanted to be a writer, so I was working in publishing to work with books.
Actually, I'd never planned to be an author. It wasn't something that I thought I could do. I never visualized it. It wasn't a dream of mine.
Yes.
I basically just started writing that book to kind of channel some of those feelings.
Yeah. And so my kind of deal in my head as a teenager was I only get to do this if I can make it work.
Yeah, wow. I love that you were so responsible and you thought about that.
Yeah.
So good to see you, Nat.
We've known each other for a really long time, which has been really nice at kind of different points in our creative process. We first met, how long would that be? When was your book?
So my book came out 11 years ago, so maybe it would have been about 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
When you were on the team that designed my first book cover for Hate is Such a Strong Word.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, this poor man, because you asked me if I had any ideas and I just said I want it to be blue, and that's everything I gave you, and you had to work with that. And I loved my book cover. Hazel Lamb did a great job with it.
She did such a good job.
But yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. So hang on, so that's 12 years ago. So that must have been around the time that I was first starting to publish too, I think.
Yeah. Was your first book, There's a Monster Under...
It's Under My Bed Who Farts with Tim Miller, yeah. So, so I was in the design department at HarperCollins and you were one of Harper's authors, and so we got to meet to talk about, what your book was going to look like. And you were writing, and then Tim and I were writing, and it's, it was fun.
And
it was really fun.
Our careers have changed so much.
They have.
In that time.
Neither of us had kids then, right?
No.
Yeah. So that changes everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you find writing in the context of family and kids and life and I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's something I think about a lot. And I read so many Paris Review interviews with authors to see if I could get a glimpse into how they work, and if there's some secret or some magic ingredient that I'm missing. And often there isn't, and it's just about the discipline of writing. But then it's so hard when you have the unpredictability of family life in there. Yeah.
And I think about how I had so much time to write my first book, and there were no children in the picture, and I could draft and redraft. And
so what did your life look like in broad brushstrokes when you wrote your first book?
So I had a job, but that had nothing to do with writing or journalism or anything that I'm doing now. It was just a really easy job that brought no stress into my life or no work home, and I would write before work and after work. But the first iteration, I guess, of Hate is Such a Strong Word was written when I still lived at home with my parents, and I was really bored, and it was very cathartic. I had a lot of things I wanted to say about being Lebanese and being caught between two worlds, especially because at that time, that was the time of the Cronulla riots and things like that. So I felt like a lot of people were doing the talking about our community, and not enough people from the community, not through any fault of their own, were talking.
Sure.
So there was a lot of... Actually, I'd never planned to be an author. It wasn't something that I thought I could do. I never visualized it. It wasn't a dream of mine.
Yes.
I basically just started writing that book to kind of channel some of those feelings.
Yeah.
And, at first I was at home, and living at home with a Lebanese mum meant I never had to cook or clean or do there were no chores. So I just had the freedom to write. But,
and your life now?
Now I'm a mum of 3, and 2 are in primary school, and 1 is in daycare 2 days a week. So she's with me 3 days a week. And that is so different. I really get when parents talk about sandwiching writing wherever they can.
Yeah.
And I think my career's changed as a result of that, because I was writing novels before, and now I'm writing picture books because they're easier to fit in to that life. What about you?
So
Well, back then, we didn't have any kids. I had a job as a book designer and an art director, so I was spending a lot of time thinking about books. I'd always wanted to be a writer, so I was working in publishing to work with books.
Yeah.
And I was always writing, but writing had been something that I did at night or first thing in the morning. And so, yeah, I think, like, to your point, you said, you know, you could write in a time when you felt bored. And I was like, I never feel bored. Like, there isn't space to feel bored now, but there was then. So now we've got 4 kids.
Yeah.
Oldest is 11, youngest is 4. We've just moved out of the city and we're down on the south coast of New South Wales now.
How beautiful.
We're homeschooling those 4 kids. And so, yeah, it's actually really peaceful now that we've made this move and change, which is really lovely. But it's certainly, we're with the kids all the time.
Yeah.
So there are no grandparents or anything where we are now. And, you know, we're new in a community, so we're still making friends. And so we're with the kids 24 hours a day. And so that's been interesting to work out how to carve out writing time and creative time. And I've realised, I think, a lot more than I used to, how much writing happens in my head.
Wow.
Before it gets to the page.
Yeah.
And then realise, well, I can do some of that in other pockets. So I can be thinking or developing stories while walking the dog or washing up or at the moment trying to clear bush before we get to summer. And so, yeah, that's been interesting. But because the actual sitting down writing time is a lot more reduced.
Yeah. And do you ever find, like, when you're doing the washing up or clearing bush, whatever, that you have to write something down straight away? Or do you think that you've become better at writing in your head, if that makes sense, that you are okay to, I guess, wait 30 minutes till you have time to jot something down?
I do. I use the Notes app in my phone a lot.
Okay.
So lots of things get thrown in there so that I can let them go and know that I've got it. But yeah, I think finding... It's been a real interesting kind of... I see my creative process as now really integrated with my family life. They're not two totally separate things in the way that they were before. Like, my writing and my work was always really private, solitary, done in the early hours of the morning, something like that. Now it's much more integrated with the rest of my life, which I think if I wasn't writing kids' books might be really difficult.
I was going to say, surely that some of that parenting and spending time with kids informs your work, because my kids find your books so relatable. They love it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I hope so. I kind of... people often ask me, you know, do you read your books to your kids and do they give you ideas? And I think it's just about being immersed in the world of kids, which I am all the time. And at the moment, my kids are the same age as the kids who read my books, and so that's really wonderful. That will change. Yeah, how much do you think about your own children while you're creating?
So definitely so I wanted to write picture books for maybe a couple of years or 3 years before I was successful in getting one across the line.
Sure.
And it was because I had just had my 3rd child, and I wanted the older 2 kids to know that the love that I had for them wasn't going to transfer to the new baby. So it was definitely something that foray into children's picture books coming from young adult was definitely influenced by time with my children.
Yes.
And then, I think everything after that has literally come from me being a parent and just trying to notice, like James Wood talks about, like how, if you want to write, you have to be a noticer of life.
Yes.
And then when you
start noticing life. It allows you to read life better and interpret life better. So I was able to kind of ascertain the things that my kids needed or the things that I needed, like with Nice and Slow. I wanted more slow days, which I don't know if I've got those yet, but it sounds like you have. So there is, they do inform each other. And I love that, because I think sometimes there's this idea that having kids can really detract from your career, but in some careers it can actually enhance it.
Sure. I think I've found it helpful to have less separation. And I know that it depends on your job, right? But I really like the fact that my kids fully understand my work. Yeah. They know what I do. They know what I spend time doing, which is, sometimes drawing funny pictures. And they're welcome mostly in that space with me. Like, it's not, I don't disappear to some mystery location to do some job they don't understand. I am fortunate enough to be able to do something that they understand, that they can do too. Yeah. And so they draw and they write their stories and we talk about that, and they're just doing the same stuff that I do. And that's been really wonderful when thinking about kind of creative family life and how we raise our kids in the context that we live in. And I've really enjoyed that. Do you have a space that is yours?
I do. It's a room in the front of the house. I like it because I like to open the shutters and look outside. And I think being nosy or curious is really helpful when you're a writer. Yeah. But it's an open room, so there's no door. Yeah. And my husband will, if I tell him I need like an hour to edit or I need an hour to write, and the kids are like coming in and out, he'll be like, we should have got like a door. We should have had like you can't put a door. It's like literally an open room.
Sure, yeah.
But that's okay too, because I think it's also important that I'm like there for them, and I'm always like straddling the need for like time out to recharge, but then also remembering that like I brought them into this world and they're my responsibility and they're only young once, and I want to be with them. But it's so tricky, and I'm stressing a lot about what like comes next, because picture books are doable with kids, but I also want to write other things, and it seems so long ago that I wrote the first draft of a novel, The Cult of Romance. I think I finished the first draft like December 2018, January 2019. So it's been 5 years since I wrote something big.
Yes.
I'm struggling to imagine if I can do that again. Like if my brain has the capacity to stretch.
How do you do? Like, if you were going to start a big project like that, where do you start?
So I always start like I remember reading something that Kate Grenville said about making piles, and that she collects things. Like she collects like ticket stubs or pamphlets or whatever that is going to, I guess, influence her world. It's not that literally, but I start by writing like little scenes or conversations that I know the central characters need to have, or like pivotal moments in the story. And I'll do that over like 5 or 6 pages in lead pencil, really rough, so messy, lots of mind maps. And then if I feel like I've got something substantial, then I can open like a Word doc and start from there. But I always read about like those parents or those writers who wake up and they'll write like 1,000 words before their kids wake up, and I want to be those people, but so far I have not managed that, and I think maybe I haven't disciplined myself enough, and I know that there needs to be a lot of discipline there. So.
Sometimes the words flow and sometimes they don't, though, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I agree. Like I used to read about Bryce Courtney's methods a lot, and when I look at some of their, like he would work kind of, I think it was longer than 9 to 5, but he would basically get up and just sit at his desk and write all day. Yeah. And then, and I find it kind of comes in, Well, I think that's what I was trying to get at before about I realised how much of the work happens in my head.
Yeah.
And sometimes sitting typing is not the way. So I've started walking a lot more and doing a bit of a Tristan Banks and writing on my phone while walking. Find that really helpful. And I have found getting out of the house useful.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm trying to solve a problem. Like if I've got a story problem that I'm stuck in. It was interesting with Funny Kids Spooky Time, which is the new one. I wanted to do something in that kind of scary story space because lots of kids really enjoy.
Yeah.
I mean, Goosebumps was massive when I was a kid, and there always seems to be a space there for kind of scary stories. But I don't particularly love. I don't watch horror very much. I don't enjoy it. It doesn't. And a couple of my kids are quite sensitive to not wanting to be scared in a story. And so I wanted to find a way to write about this subject of a kind of scary, sort of bring it out at Halloween. It's got the whole thing. But that wasn't terrifying.
Yeah.
And so that's a kind of story problem to try to work out, okay, I know I want to be in this space, but I don't want it to be like this. Lots of kids read my books to go to bed. I don't want to freak them out.
Yeah.
So, and so that was it. The kind of the solution in the end was to have Max and his friends are making a scary movie.
Oh,
so
cool.
the whole thing exists behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of, most of the time, not all the time, most of the time in the book, Max is the scarer rather than the scary. And I found that to be a really fun way to be able to explore that subject without it ever getting too intense.
Yeah.
So I hope I've achieved that, but that was kind of those kind of story problems. For me, that's not a sit and write problem. That's a walk and think problem.
Yeah. And what about when because we see each other a lot at writers' festivals. So what about when you're away from home and you're with other kids? How does that enhance your practice?
Definitely. Yeah. I kind of think you've got to be, you've got to be in the space, in the age group with the kids who are reading your stuff. I just don't know how you could do it without finding some kind of point of contact, not necessarily your own family, but schools are a great example of that, so that you can just keep them first and foremost in your mind. That's the thing that hits me every time I do a writers' festival is oh, these are the kids.
Yeah.
I'm not writing for some mystery thing. I'm not particularly writing for my own, I'm always writing for my own creative satisfaction, but this is not just for me.
Yeah.
And so having those kids first and foremost in my mind and then literally in front of my face is really helpful. What about you?
Yeah, I find that being at writers' festivals, I've thought about changing up my approach a little bit because I feel like coming from a culturally and racially marginalised background and wanting to talk to that experience of not really being seen in a lot of the literature I read when I was young means that I'm kind of there to inform rather than to talk so much about my I'm not as fun, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because I'm almost teaching them a lesson or helping them to kind of see what a certain period in time was like for people. And sometimes I lament the fact that I wish I had the opportunity to not have that burden of representation sometimes and I could just be creative. So it'll be really interesting as I write more and more in the kids space because they're very different. The YA books and the children's picture books are very different.
Of course.
How that will work, and if I do more, because I do a lot of my writers' festival gigs are for the teenagers, so it'll be interesting to see how being with little children might
change that up.
Yes. Well, they're much cuter to start
That's
with.
true.
You're very brave. Teenagers terrify me. So
Yeah. And what about your I guess looking at it as like kind of like a business, like I have to, for it to kind of be sustainable, because, I sit on the board of the Australian Society of Authors. I know that the average Australian author's income is just $18,300, that our government really needs to like do more and maybe look to overseas models about like things like fixed book pricing to help authors make a living wage from their work.
Yeah, right.
Do you ever think about your work as kind of like a business and think, okay, well, for this to be sustainable, I need to like publish 2 books a year? Or does that add too much pressure for you?
Oh, no, I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
So this doing what I'm doing was my dream. That's what I wanted to do since I was 7 years old.
I love this.
And so, but it became quickly apparent to me that you got to work out how to do that because, I've got a family and I need to be able to pay a mortgage and so my kind of deal in my head as a teenager was I only get to do this if I can make it work.
Yeah, wow. I love that you were so responsible and you thought about that.
Yeah, remember the movie Sliding Doors?
Yes.
You remember the dropkick boyfriend?
Yes.
Who is going to the library every day to write his novel.
Yeah.
And he's just such a loser and she is carrying everything while he pursues his dream. I remember watching that as a teenager and go, no, I will not be that guy.
Yeah.
So I think about it a lot and it's complicated and it's hard and so this is our main business. This is what where most of our income comes from. And it's, you don't get a salary, you don't get money each month. So cash flow, you've got to manage that. You've got to think about that. You've got to plan ahead. I quite like that part of it.
Yeah.
Cool. It definitely feels like a business to me. But it is, it's the way I get to do the thing that I love. And I know how rare that is, that I'm able to do a job that I really, really enjoy. So, but yes, it's hard. Don't get into kids' books for the money. It's not there.
Absolutely.
I've loved chatting with you. This has been really nice.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too. It's always nice because we see each other, but we're always like, I'm off to this session and you're off to that session. And you don't really get to see how people you have worked with for some time actually work or hear about their process. Yeah. And it's always nice to kind of get a glimpse of that and to feel that some of the things that you struggle with, i.e. how am I going to make this work, or some of the challenges of solving a book problem, that they're not just you, that there isn't something wrong with you as you're doing them. That others have the same kind of deal.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Matt.